I suppose it is the first webinar in English from Data Privacy Brazil. So we're very happy to do this conversation about contact tracing and fundamental rights. Before introducing each of us, we have Diego, Fábio, and Mariana here. I would like to thank our community in Brazil for pointing out yesterday that we were going to organize an all-male panel, and we recognized this mistake. We asked Mariana to be with us, part of our team. So in the name of data privacy, I'd like to thank the community of women in privacy, and that helped us to do a better webinar in 4 people today. So thank you. Let me just introduce myself. So my name is Rafael Zanatta. I am the research coordinator of Data Privacy Brazil. We are a recently founded NGO based in São Paulo that is doing work in the intersection between fundamental rights, data protection, and technology. For those that do not know the NGO, we have the website dataprivacybr.org. I'll ask you to go there and see our policies for ethical funding. And we have Mariana Rielli. Hi, Mariana. Mariana is also a research lead of the NGO. She's one of the coordinators of our Observatory of Privacy and Data Protection. Thank you, Mariana. We're happy to be with you. And we have 2 international guests that will share a little bit of their experience on the subject with us. We have Fábio Chiusi, a project manager at Algorithm Watch, a Berlin-based organization. Ciao, Fábio.
Hello.
Algorithm Watch, ciao. Algorithm Watch describes itself as a non-profit research and advocacy organization committed to evaluating and shedding light on algorithm decision-making processes that have social relevance, meaning they are used either to predict or to describe human action or to make decisions automatically. Fábio Chiusi, I know Fábio for many years from Twitter. Fábio is an Italian expert who's also a fellow at the Nexus Center in Torino. After a decade reporting in tech, he worked as a consultant and assistant researcher in data and politics from Tactical Tech, also based in Berlin, I suppose, and AI and journalist from the London School of Economics, among other things. Big curriculum from Fábio. It's a truly pleasure to have you here, Fábio. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
We also have Diego Naranjo, policy manager at European Digital Rights. For those that do not know EDRI is based in Brussels. It's called European Digital Rights because it has the objective of promoting, protecting, and upholding civil and human rights in the digital environment. EDRI's priorities for the next years are privacy, surveillance, net neutrality, and copyright reform. EDRI is a huge organization. I mean, it's formed by members of different countries. Maybe Diego can talk a little bit later. And they comprise, in my opinion, the most important NGOs in digital rights in Europe. Diego joined EDRI in October 2014, and he has been covering data protection, privacy, and copyright-related work for EDRI. He also has an international experience in the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the European Union Fundamental Rights Agency, and the Free Software Foundation Europe, FSFE. At the national level, Diego also worked as a lawyer in Spain, and he co-founded the Andalusian Human Rights Organization, Grupo 17 de Marzo. Gracias, Diego. Thank you. So I'm going to slow down a little bit. Victor told me I'm speaking too fast. So I would like to begin saying that we know that contact tracing is a node technique for public health. I mean, it has been used for decades, maybe centuries, to discover, as it's a method to identify who is sick and to understand the patterns of contagions, so how a disease spreads. So in a nutshell, if you go to Google and type down contact tracing, you will see that it is indeed an important instrument for public health. And it has been used traditionally based on interviews and understanding who was interacting with who else and to identify patterns of contagions. But we have now, with the smartphone revolution and also the experiences of diseases like SARS and MERS, the health community in the past 10 years began experimenting in new forms of automated tracking systems and contact tracing. So with the coronavirus, with COVID, we have seen this trend of many countries implementing solutions for contact tracing based on the possibilities of the smartphone, of using Bluetooth systems and to understand patterns of contagious automatically. We have a project here in São Paulo in our NGO called The Data and the Virus. And we have a weekly report in which we try to explain in Portuguese what is going on in other countries in the intersection between surveillance and coronavirus. And it's quite impressive, the amount of projects, right, that have been experimented in the past 3 months. So it began in China with a plugin for Alibaba and for WeChat, showing like green light, yellow light, or red light for people that had a disease. Then South Korea began experimenting with open data on diseases, also mapping patterns of contagious. Then Singapore had the hacking experience of building up the Open Trace protocol, which also is this one is more specifically a contact tracing project. And in April, as we explained in our reports, we saw a big discussion in Europe, and also a kind of a difference in approaches regarding how to do contact tracing while also preserving privacy. So as we know, so far as we know, in April, the Pan-European Privacy Preserver Proximity Tracing was launched. But there was a disagreement between members of this project, and people like Carmela Troncoso and other researchers from Swiss and from Italy and France, they launched a different protocol called Decentralized European Privacy Proximity Tracing, which uses Bluetooth Low Energy to track and log encounters with other users. But the protocols differ in the reporting mechanism because while PPP require clients to upload contact logs to a central reporting server, this DP3T, so the decentralized one, the central reporting server never has access to contact logs, nor it is responsible for processing and informing clients of contacts. So you have basic differences in those protocols, and there has been an emerging literature covered the difference between centralized or decentralized protocols. But we'd like to focus on one specific topic, which is like, what are the concerns from NGOs of digital rights, and what are the NGOs doing? So we saw a big technical discussion, but I would like to hear from you guys the work that you're doing and how this discussion on contact tracing is provoking new projects and also awareness campaigns or new policy strategies to highlight what are the risks for privacy and data protection. So I would like to begin with you, Fábio, and ask you, like, you're an Italian expert working for an NGO in Berlin. How do you see the outcomes of these debates in the past 2 months, and what are you guys doing regarding automated decision making and privacy?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Rafael, and thanks to everybody. Algorithm Watch is really committed to trying and understand what's really going on there, which is not easy. And of course, as you can imagine, our core competence was not in epidemiology or nothing related particularly to pandemics or public health. So we did need to, at least I personally needed to study a lot for this, and I do study every day for this. So this is basically what we're doing and what I'm doing most of the time. I'm trying to understand what's going on, and a lot is going on. And so we at Algorithm Watch, the first thing we tried to do was to try and intervene immediately, because we saw that initially the debate was really skewed, and especially in Italy, for example, around like, okay, the idea that privacy was something that could have been, sacrificed in the name of public health, which of course may be true. And the GDPR, like the EU regulation on privacy and data protection, of course, allows for that. But the certain criteria that, any democracy must meet should be met even in this under these circumstances. So we tried really hard to steer the debate towards like making public health and safety compatible with fundamental rights, not just privacy. Privacy is just a piece of the puzzle. It's much broader than that. And actually, to me personally, the biggest damage that that these database responses to the COVID pandemic, the biggest danger there, I think, is cultural. It's like normalizing digital surveillance for everything, really. This is like, this is the outcome of months and months of debate. But I do think, that the work that we did, we put out a public policy position there. It's on our website. You can check it. I do think that, that the work we did together with many other NGOs, civil society activists, academics, and many other people, not just us, of course, it did work in a sense. I think that many countries in Europe, for example, are shifting from, starting from an idea of doing contact tracing through location data, GPS collection of data, which would have been like much more invasive than Bluetooth-based solutions. And actually, also some of the countries that, for example, Germany, that started started with the idea of having a centralized architecture for Bluetooth-based contact tracing, which means using proximity data, not location data. It means that the system doesn't really know who you are and where you are. It just knows that this piece of information coming from this phone has come into contact, in close enough contact to be dangerous. With these other phones, and that's the only thing you actually know. This is, of course, it is not perfect, and technicalities abound. There are many possible attacks and things that we're discovering and that we're studying. But we do know that these systems, when they're decentralized, meaning that when these calculations are done on each and everybody's smartphone and not on a central server owned by the state, for example, privacy is much more made possible by these solutions. So what we're seeing here is that many countries that adopted or are adopting centralized solutions or GPS-based solutions are having like big problems and pushbacks from either the academic and civil society sphere or the public itself, or they're having uptake problems because people don't trust the government that to give away their privacy in order to be safe. It's not exactly a trustworthy position there, as you can imagine. And one thing that we had to understand, and it was like discomforting really, is that many people are very, especially in the politicians, policymakers, as even experts, are eager to give away privacy in the name of whatever, especially of safety. And this is discomforting to me, as it's not needed. We don't really know. These systems are a bet in themselves. We don't really know. There's no evidence that they work at all. And actually sacrificing very, very hard fought, rights, fundamental rights in the name of, that's the promise of digitally enabled public health, Well, that doesn't bode well for these people, I think, and for the public debate in general. We don't really need to give away our privacy, and we don't certainly need to vouch for that or call for that to happen. Actually have some systems in place. So,
and GDPR this Monday completed 2 years, correct? And do you think that even after 2 years of a very strong regulation on fundamental rights, these politicians did not understand what is data protection about? How do you perceive?
It really depends on whether you assume. It really depends on whether you really assume good faith on part of these people. I do think that they understand that these things can be done in different ways. The fact that they do want to advocate for the more privacy invasive or rights invasive solutions anyway speaks loudly, and we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware that for some people, these rights are like, and democracy really is an obstacle to solution of problems. And what you can really see is that many countries and many people in Europe, all over Europe, are advocating for China model, for a South Korea model, for a Singapore model. And Singapore is a country that just today jailed a person for a taxi driver for 4 months because he made a comment on Facebook for 15 minutes before deleting the comment. And now is, which is deemed false by the government, and probably false concerning the coronavirus. It's okay, it's not great, but 15 minutes of a post on Facebook, 4 months in jail. Well, doesn't seem look like a model of democracy to me. So, again, we should be careful with our models. And luckily, the EU institutions have been way more careful than a lot of people, would have wanted to probably. So I do think that the documents from the EU Commission, from the Privacy Board, and from much of actually from the Parliament itself, the European Parliament itself, a resolution calling for decentralized Bluetooth-based solutions. The principles that are being put out there, it's actually, I think, a best practice worldwide, because we calling for transparency, for proportionality, for necessity, for all those principles that actually mean democracy. And we don't want to give away democracy again, in the name of techno-solutionism, like meaning technological solutions to problems that are not technological in themselves, for example, like the virus. I hope I've been clear. There is much more, but the only thing I would like to add, if I still have a minute, is that this thing Thanks. This thing is rapidly going from, contact tracing apps to actually digital surveillance more broadly, So you have thermoscanner cameras equipped with facial recognition technology, equipped on drones maybe, or on robots, patrolling areas of public places, parks, malls, schools, bracelets and wristbands, that are somehow used to enforce social distancing. And we don't really know, again, thermoscanners have lots of limitations, and the fever itself is an imperfect, signal of COVID-19 itself, as you know. And so, all these techno-solutionisms, are just popping up everywhere at a very, very frightening pace. So what I'm seeing now is a lot of marketing from the private sector. The surveillance private sector is going all in right now, trying to pitch the most outlandish solutions to all kind of public administration and governments, and that again speaks loudly about, the ethics and morals, because they do know solutions that are imperfect, and you shouldn't be pitching them they're silver bullets against the disease that can kill you, actually. So this is very dangerous, dangerous talking. That is basically it.
We're going back to you. I'd like to link with the work of Diego to have a link between the conversation. Diego, connecting to one specific thing that Fábio said, that we were already in a struggle against the lobby of firms on facial recognition. Now it seems that everything is mixing up, right? So you have the same actors that were selling solutions on facial recognition are working in the COVID sector, so to speak. Proposing solutions like to identify people with masks and so on, and integrating with new solutions on contact tracing. And EDRI has the opportunity, as far as I know, to look at from a regional perspective as well. So you have a strong network of NGOs.
Yes.
And so what is the kind of perception you have from this regional point of view on what is going on? Can you also share with us your experience?
Yes, yes. As you were saying, we are a network of 44 NGOs from all across Europe, and that defend generally human rights in the online environment. So digital rights, we could say, And since the very beginning, we were very concerned with what Fábio was saying, the problem of normalization. Around the second week of March, we already issued a statement preventing, trying to prevent sort of techno-solutionism, trying to go into this mass surveillance by design and by default. We're saying that, okay, this is, we live in an unprecedented crisis. Probably extreme measures need to be used, but hold on, we need to, of course, respect fundamental rights. There's necessity and proportionality. We have the GDPR in Europe, and that needs to be taken into account. And I have to say that generally, most of the suggestions that we have suggested have been taken on board, as Fábio was saying, by the Parliament, but also by the European Commission, which is, for those of you who might not be fully aware of how complicated the EU works, it is the executive body of the European Union. So they have issued a series of a toolbox and guidelines, which are very much in line with what we and our members have been advocating for, which is for open protocols or open source, decentralized, all the data in the device, not in a centralized servers. We should use the Bluetooth-based apps instead of the ones that use the GPS because they're less invasive, and so on. So basically, we are quite happy that our influence has made it to these guidelines. But of course now, and the problem is that not the problem, but the challenge is in making all of this work at the national level. And that, I think that's the next step. Because there have been bad implementations. One of the applications that was early developed in Poland was mandatory for all those who were in quarantine because they were sick. And it went to the evil detail of a police could request you to take a selfie of yourself at home with the GPS on. So you could prove in a way that you were at home respecting the quarantine, the self-isolation. And I mean, that sounds as the most dystopian, one of the most dystopian apps I can imagine. And of course, it was anything that we would advocate. So I think all of that seemed to have been stopped. As I was saying as well, the GPS solutions are not even anymore on the table, or at least not from the Brussels level. And I think the member states, the European states, have a good guidelines to implement it. There seems to be clear solutions on the table to do things right, and I hope that can happen. Another unexpected ally that we had in all of these have been Google and Apple. They are both developing together a system that will go directly into the operative system of our smartphones. As you know, they cover 98% of the operating system in the smartphones market. And that will sort of apply, if the member states want, that would apply directly in all of the phones at the same time. And from what I've seen so far, from what we heard from them, and all of this with a pinch of salt, because of course we're talking about Google, especially, and it seems to be also going to the right direction. The data will not be used for anything else, especially not for targeted advertising. The data will only go to the National Health Service if the users allow. It needs to be voluntary, and so on and so on. So I think again we have a good ideas at hand, because we risk all of this could become a permanent emergency measure. I remember when I was taking my first flight that I could bring my own water, or even when I was a student, I brought sometimes my own alcohol in the planes, and that is something which is unimaginable now. And I remember having police in the entrance of the airports, and now we have private actors. All of this has changed very rapidly because of the 9/11 mainly. And now it's the normality. We cannot go back. I cannot imagine any member state, any state going back to how we were before, just in case something happens. So yes, I think at the moment is now to stop all of this. You made a good link with the biometrics problem. We were actually studying the problem of biometrics before the pandemic, around November. We started because we heard, okay, France is doing something, Sweden is also doing something. Okay, there's some schools in another state that is also doing. And when we realized there were around 14.
You had a big meeting, sorry to interrupt, but you also had a big meeting in January at the privacy camp with the European Data Protection Supervisor to talk about these new risks of biometrics and facial recognition, right? So you were studying and you were developing a strong work in this area.
Yeah, and we recently published it, and when we were going to publish it, we didn't know because people are focused on the COVID-19 crisis, but we realized that it's actually very much linked to the current problem because of what Fábio was saying about the scanning your temperature when you enter the workplace and when you enter a plane or whatnot. And because biometrics is way broader than facial recognition, it could be the way you walk, it could be your temperature, it could be many other things. So yes, we discussed it then, and we have just published a report a few weeks ago, where we basically asked for a ban on the use of biometrics for mass surveillance in publicly accessible spaces. So this is a clear no, you cannot use all of this. And the COVID tech, we say, okay, if you want to use technology, you can use ABC with all of these requirements, safeguards, all good.
Yeah.
But for this, it's just, this cannot work, this is illegal, you cannot use it.
It seems to me, Diego, that we were, before COVID, before February, we were like truly gaining momentum on a ban on facial recognition. Like it was quite impressive, right? Like in 6 months, there was like a lot of protests, open letters, policy papers, meetings with policymakers. And it seemed to me that we were like almost there, you know, to get a ban. Do you think the situation changes with COVID? Because now the general public and everyone else, like they're all paranoid about public health. You can always use the discourse on public health as a trump, you know, as to win the conversation. Do you think it has changed, or do you think NGOs now will face a harder scenario? Like, how does it affect things that you were already doing and conquering at EDRI?
Yes, I would say that we were not that close in Europe, at least from my perspective. We were just amazed on how many of the systems were deployed in absolute silence. So when the facial recognition systems were deployed in Hong Kong, we all knew it was an attack on democracy, there's a totalitarian state, and so on. And we realized that we had 14 European states doing basically the same. Okay, not crushing, not protesting yet, but doing similar systems, and there was absolute silence. So we were not that close, and we would say that we can use the opportunity to say, look, we're going to build a new society in general. It's about mobility, it's about the environment, it's about also surveillance and all of these techniques. And we need to build a different type of society, which is not the one that we had before, but it's not going to be, we don't want to be in a dystopian society. So this needs not to be used, this needs to be banned. And I think we can actually take the attention of the public to tell them, look, it shouldn't be legal that they just scan everyone on the street all the time, the temperature, just to see if you're sick or not, to prevent the pandemic or to prevent serious crimes or whatsoever. It shouldn't be allowed. And we hope to make a big case. For us, it's going to be the big campaign this year, for sure.
As far as I know, Belgium is one of the countries in which the percentage of people infected with COVID are higher than others. Not in absolute numbers, but in terms of the percentage.
The population seems to be one of the highest.
Yeah. Do you see, I'm curious to know, are there strong differences between European countries in how they're approaching this from the perspective of privacy, or they're almost like converging to the same debate that is going on in the European Commission? How also the crisis affects the very idea of a communitarian project, a European project on the issue?
Yes, I would say that in the beginning, the implementation was very diverse. So we had this example of the Polish app, it was pretty dystopian. Then we had a Spanish one, which was more sloppy than dystopian, and then that was changed. And what has changed, as you were saying, is that, okay, now we have a framework which has been backed by the European Commission that is very clear, which is in line with the civil society advocates for. And now, unfortunately, it's our turn to make that happen. So either the civil society pushes at the state level to make this happen, and any apps that are developed, if they have to develop any app, is done with these guidelines or any other similar guidelines at the national level, either or that won't happen. It's up to us in a way, as with climate change and many other threats that we face. Either we act, either civil society act, the individuals, organizations act and make this happen at the national level, or it won't happen. They can just ignore all the nice guidelines that we can have on paper. I wouldn't say it's a trend.
Sorry.
I wouldn't say there is a trend. Now the implementation is being a bit more silently than in the beginning, So I think we now still have time to act.
Excellent. I would pass to Mariana because I think she has a couple of questions for you guys.
I do actually. Hi guys. So I have a comment first. We are about to launch a report on facial recognition together with Instituto Igarapé from Rio de Janeiro. Maybe we can exchange impressions on another occasion, because we found that we don't have a movement for a ban in Brazil, but some initiatives to actually regulate the practice of facial recognition that are very interesting. So maybe we can talk about that later. My first question is not exactly a policy question. I think it's more of a curiosity. It's about how regular people are perceiving these apps and these technologies, including in terms of their own privacy. Since a main factor in their efficiency, the efficiency of the apps, is that people actually take part and adhere to them. And the second question that I have is about discrimination, because I've been reading some articles and papers in different aspects of contact tracing and how contact tracing can enable discrimination. For example, by generating more false positives in low socioeconomic status areas than in other areas. And so is this something that is being widely discussed? And how are you dealing with this issue?
So let's start.
Both of you.
Yeah, Fábio, sure.
Okay, thanks. Sure. Concerning people's attitudes, it's really tough to say at this point. I've seen some surveys from different places saying different things, actually. From what I understand, the public opinion is skewed a lot, as usual, on these topics. My concern is how much they actually understand of what's going on. Because if we're having troubles understanding what's going on, I cannot imagine, somebody who has no clue of what contact tracing is, or what's the difference between location and proximity data, or things like that. So I do think that people value their privacy and rights. That's my perspective, my starting perspective, and usually it's confirmed. Because every time you just, they usually say that, detractors, they usually say, oh, why would you be concerned about, state surveillance when you have Google and big tech, collecting lots of data? But well, Facebook doesn't send you to jail. And if you're not concerned with privacy at all, just give me your, personal email passwords and log in, data. Since privacy doesn't exist anyway, so it doesn't make a difference, right? But of course it does make it. The onus is on governments to be clear and transparent about what they do. And the onus is on us, of course, in understanding and keeping them, and keeping them accountable to principles, and luckily, coming to discrimination, what I see is that most of the attempts at, attaching some kind of privilege to downloading the app, in terms of like in medical, in public health terms, all these attempts basically have failed. All the ones that I've seen in Italy, they tried to do so. They wanted to, but the government didn't comply. I know that somebody in France said something similar, but yesterday they voted in the parliament and they turned that amendment down, from what I understood. So basically, there is no discrimination there. Of course, the app, even the best app, can in itself be discriminatory or have discriminatory outcomes, as of course, technology reflects the discriminations there are in society. So, of course, people who have less opportunities might not have the right mobile phone, might not have the kind of knowledge that they need to understand what's going on, and, inform and have an informed decision about what to do with these kind of apps. I'm conflicted myself, it really depends on what these kind of apps are going to do, and whether they're going to be transparent about code, the source code, whatever it does. But I want it to be understandable for everybody. I don't want to have to be a technician or a technologist really to understand what's going on with my rights. It shouldn't be like that. And I think also that EU regulation is pretty clear about this. You should have you should be in the position to give an actually informed consent to what's going on, especially concerning biometric data, for example, or other kind of data. This is especially clear in EU regulation again. So I do think that this is very contentious, of course, but also being deprived of your right to be outside, and enjoy life, really. That these are also limitations of your fundamental rights. We should keep that in mind. We're not opposed to technology in principle. We just want to be, decent human beings living in a democracy, even under a pandemic, which is a different issue, I think. Still important.
Yes, if I may, on the issue of efficiency, I agree that there could be a lot of problems with the false positives, for example. No, we were talking before, I think before we started with the issue in a small community like in the favelas in Brazil, but also right here in my apartment, if I'm connected too close to my neighbor and she tests positive, but of course there's a wall and we would never get infected, I hope. That would be a false positive that could bring a lot of issues around efficiency. So yes, I think that brings a lot of questions as well. I'm a bit less concerned. I mean, it's concerning to a certain point, because why using something that doesn't work? So that needs to be proven. So we need to work on that. But for me, from a fundamental rights point of view, is if we're gonna do this, if we see it's efficient, if it's necessary, and so on, we need to make it necessary and proportionate. But yes, it's a good point there. Because a lot of people need to install them, around 65 to 70 something % need to install these apps and use them to be effective for the society as a whole. And if that happens and then we have lots of false positive, this might not even effective. So that's a good point, for which I don't have a good answer. Unfortunately, we still have to research more about the impact of these technologies. And discrimination, yes, I can imagine, right-wing governments around Europe, but not only, trying to map everyone with the high temperature in the migrant, where the communities where all the migrants or refugees are, the temperature is a bit too high, let's expel them rapidly with that excuse of the pandemic. So yeah, the issue of discrimination, then if this affects mostly or disproportionately to people with a lower income, that could be facing problems with access to employment and so on. So we see the risks in that aspect as well.
Just to add, very, very quickly, nobody actually knows whether these things work. That's the thing, so it's not just us. It's even like the most quoted, papers and everything, they're highly speculative. And plus, you also have a lot of instances of real life situations of countries that did not have a contact tracing app, and yet they managed to contain the pandemic. For example, the country, they still have to implement the app, and it worked. And even like I'm very skeptical also of the narrative that southeastern countries contain the virus because of technology, of big data, or digital contact tracing. I'm very skeptical of that. First of all, they haven't defeated the virus, as you can see from South Korea going into lockdown today, just today.
Yeah.
And also all the most of these apps or these technologies were not adopted once they had like good results, once they managed to actually do manual contact tracing, that they were prepared to do because of previous pandemics. So this is the main difference, I think, between these countries and the countries in which things didn't work out, like Italy, for example. If we had a plan, it really didn't show, and instead these countries did have a plan and did put it in place, and it was really easier for them because they basically their governments can do whatever they want without having to bother with population or parliaments, really, which is a very different predicament like that in a democracy in which you have to justify your choices, at least try to justify even under some exceptional circumstances. So that was my my point.
Also, technology doesn't work alone. So in South Korea, they relied a lot on massive testing of the population. This wouldn't work in Brazil because we don't have enough tests. So even if we had the right contact tracing app, it wouldn't work.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to even begin to talk about the Brazilian approach on the federal level because it does not exist and it's so crazy. But I would like to comment about one good side of the Brazilian discussion, which is also a question for you, more optimistic about the opportunity for activism on fundamental rights using courts and legislation. Because 3 weeks ago, we participated as amicus curiae in an important case at the Supreme Court in which they were evaluating the constitutionality of one measure by the president that wanted to share data from all the telecommunication operators to the federal government in order to conduct a statistical research on unemployment, to understand like the level of income of families and unemployment. And the demand of data sharing was very disproportionate. So they wanted all the data, and not only the data sufficient for the research. The purpose was not very well limited. There were not enough safeguards, and we used all these elements to present reasonings to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court came up with a very good decision, putting the limits on how to use data, even in a case of pandemics. So it created a very important precedent for future cases. We also know about Israel that had an important precedent also 3 weeks ago. The decision was published, and it is also about the limits of using the national security forces to collect data and to police population. So do you think that, I'm also aware that last week, Orla Lindsay and Michelle Wiley and other researchers in the UK, they also drafted a proposal, like a bill, on fundamental rights in times of pandemics. Like the police does not have the right to arrest you if you're not carrying a smartphone, and other proposals which are very interesting, like mandatory public data protection impact assessment before any kind of decision regarding the use of data. So it's an improvement regarding GDPR. So if you look at courts, the possibility of doing activism in courts, and also the possibility of creating new laws regarding fundamental rights, is this the time also to use as an opportunity, like to think optimistically and to lay down this new clear ideas about digital rights and fundamental rights? Or do you think that it's not so optimistic like this, the scenario, and it's not so easy? So I'd like to hear you about this possible optimistic scenario of changing things through parliaments, which represents us, and also courts.
Well, my work is mainly trying to influence the European Parliament and the European institutions. So if that is not possible, I will be fired very soon. And also, I like one of the quotes from Spider-Man, but I don't think it's from someone very intellectual that says that optimism is revolutionary. So I stick to that. So I think we need to be optimistic. And regarding the courts, well, that's some of the core issues that we do. We have some of our members that we don't do from the philosophy litigation ourselves, but some of our members, NOIB in Austria and Epicenter and many others, Open Rights Group, International, they do litigation at the European and regional level. And yes, it's definitely one of the tools. Basically, when something fails at the legislative level, if that we cannot win there, we go to the courts. Or if there's something that is happening without any law, we go to courts. And so yes, definitely yes, and that's going to be one of the avenues for sure. We're going to try first the legislative one first, but if not, we'll go to court, of course. On new laws, yes, but watch out, because we are very careful with not reopening the debate of the GDPR, which took almost 5 years of discussions. I see Fábio already suffering, imagining the reopening of the GDPR. So no one from the CSI side wants to reopen that Pandora's box.
Yeah.
But that said, I think the AI upcoming regulation in the EU might be one of opportunity not to legislate over the GDPR, but to say a ban on biometric surveillance. So we will gonna use that opportunity to say that without I want to highlight that without reopening the GDPR.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would also be very careful with legislation, especially because we don't really know where it goes once you open the vase of Pandora. Basically, you don't really know where it ends. And yeah, also, the principles are quite clear, I think, already. If you look at, EU documents, it's pretty clear that the location tracking, for example, it's not good. It's not okay. So you're going to end up having problems with your data protection authority and legislation. And in Italy, for example, the data protection authority is very careful and very, is very into this. And I stop this madness, from happening. Can you hear me now? Oh, sorry, because I can see.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, no, I would just say that I would definitely agree to stop the madness of biometrics proliferation, facial recognition everywhere, like popping up from nowhere and with no meaningful public debate or transparency, that for sure. And, of course, what we do at Algorithm Watch is I'm project manager for this project called Automating Society. And last year was an investigation into a first foray into, mapping automated decision making in Europe, and we had 12 countries, 12 country studies, and the EU chapter. And this year we're going to have 16. Plus, each country is going to have an investigation, so a proper, journalistic endeavor there. And so we're trying to what we find out there, and we're also considering, we're working on a COVID section, also related section, of course, for this year's report. What we find out there, is that it is possible to actually bring bad algorithms to court and win. And for example, in Holland, we just had a very important case with SIRI, the anti-fraud algorithmic system, and it was ruled unconstitutional, and it's basically scrapped. And I'm assuming it was ever used really, because apparently it was never used anyway. But yeah, there are cases in Spain, in Finland, in which you start having litigation, having legislation mandating some kind of transparency on algorithms, and all of these can be very helpful in making the case for opening up contact tracing and the like. Of course, as soon as we would see, that the things go really bad, like the many countries start using, Bluetooth-based apps as Trojans for, I don't know, GPS-based apps, basically, or we discover they have some kind of backdoor that enables, location tracking. Fantasy is the limit there, as you know, when these matters are involved. And of course, we will probably say, okay, we need laws, we need regulation, but at this, it's not really needed, because if you do something like that, there are avenues to oppose to that. Yeah.
And I'm curious about, because I know that Diego and people from ADRI, it was really important to be in Brussels in order to have direct contact with policymakers and decision makers. And now with the pandemic, this is much harder for activists, right? In Brazil, this is also a problem for us. I mean, we cannot go to the Congress. We cannot speak directly with congressmen, which is something that we used to do. And now it seems that no one has time and everything is done online. Does this affect the work for you guys, and how you're dealing with this scenario of really having a direct contact with decision makers and translating the policies and the studies that you're doing to a language that they can understand? How to do it in a scenario in which the attention is scarce, like they don't have time and everything is online?
Yes, well, definitely, yeah, it was a change, but for us, we started in the lockdown. That was around the 13th of March, I think, for us. We said, okay, we're gonna be, have more time to relax, to do reports, to read all these reports that are in one folder in my computer. It's not the case. We were busier than ever, and I think it's the case for everyone else on our field. And so we were busier than ever. And actually, for us, regarding talking to policymakers, it was in a way the opposite. We were asking the commissioners to find meetings with them when they were elected after December. And, they had time, they were trying to schedule, we didn't know. And after the pandemic, after the close-up, we told, look, we know you're busy, but, we still need to talk to you. This is unprecedented time with the COVID issue and all of that. We really need to talk to you. And we met with 3 commissioners and their cabinets. The commissioners are like the ministries, to the ministers of the European Union. So we met with them this day. We have participated in webinars like this or in many other events. To some extent, we were even more busier than before. Of course, all the meetings with all the politicians has slowed down, but also has slowed down the work in the parliament and the commission. So we are all of us at the same pace. So both EDRI and volunteer, who are on the opposite extreme of surveillance and fundamental rights, are both slowed down, and also the commission and the parliament. So it works for all of us in the same way.
Well, for me, it's a little different. My project is not exactly, has no real attachment to any politician or any parliament really. But I do miss a network. It's the network of researchers I'm working with. I manage this fantastic network of like 20 something researchers from all over Europe. And they're just amazing. And of course, we were planning to meet and discuss, together the findings and, and just basically hang out together. And it's an important part of our work, I think, and that's basically also why we travel so much and we go and meet each other, at conferences and places. We all know that they're not that useful in the end, they're useful in human wise,
Yeah, sure.
Because you can build, connections, you can find yourself in other people, and you can feel confident that you're not alone when you do.
A lot of good ideas come in the karaoke when you go out to sing and have a beer, right?
Yeah, I prefer that part of conferences. Yeah, for sure.
No, but honestly, we're all facing the same problem that RightsCon was cancelled, many conferences were cancelled, and we did not have the same opportunity to interact, right, and to build connections.
It is true, though, that if you need to, we do have a journalistic part of our work, and it's true that it's easier for them to not respond because of the coronavirus, whatever you ask, and of course, but that is understandable, really. And of course, it would have been easier. I did work in the Italian parliament until last year or something, and I know that it's easier when you can actually physically reach people. Hey, how does that work? You can physically block them, but now it's not possible anymore. So yeah, we try and push hard with emails, but we hope that content will be king, even when we publish, and hopefully,
Mari, you have a final comment with Diego and Fábio?
No, I don't think so. Maybe just thank them for their contributions and say that we can contribute later with other materials, and maybe the report that I mentioned, we can exchange impressions and just that. Yeah,
I would like to thank you. Thanks, first of all, everyone who's watching and following this conversation. Thanks, Diego and Fábio, for your precious time. And ask you sorry for the mistake about the time. It was wrong in the European time. But we're very glad that we had the opportunity to talk, to exchange ideas, to get to know the work of you guys. We're going to share the links of the reports and the pages of the NGOs, so the whole Brazilian network can understand your work and read it. We can also share the report we published. We published a big report on pandemics and privacy with 10 principles and recommendations. It was very useful for this case in the Supreme Court because we departed from this report to build our legal thesis. And we can talk about how Brazil and European countries are dealing with the same trouble and coming up with solutions that converge. I think it's very, very important for us as researchers and journalists and activists to be together and and to be optimistic as a
Yes.
revolutionary act, right?
Yes.
Exactly. We're gonna change the
Great.
world.
No, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Hope to
Let's
connect
do
soon. Thanks,
that.
buddy.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thanks.
Bye.